listening to the Brenton on Tour podcast.
That's right.
He travels the world running concerts and searches for the best coffee, people, and amazing stories so you don't have to.
Pay attention, you're going to learn something for a change.
This is a show about all of those things and much, much more.
You're blowing my mind right now. I hope someone's recording this.
So settle in, pour a cup of amazing coffee. He's a coffee snob, by the way. Crank that ghetto blaster and enjoy the 150,000 ranked podcast in the land.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
I think that's an exaggeration. It's the Brenton on Tour podcast.
Any question?
Here's BD.
And here we are, another week. It's the Brenton on Tour podcast for a Wednesday on the Dean Blundell Network. How's everybody doing out there? Had a lot of engagement last week on my making it topic, which, has a broad area that we can cover. But given the fact that I'm in the music industry and I'm surrounded by great people that are either making it, have made it, or trying to make it, I wanted to have some more guests on to talk about this subject and bring some people on that played an integral role in my journey to trying to make it, but also have a great story of their own out there. And who better than two great guys in my world and in my life that helped me along the way, but also have great stories and are very very, very well respected in this business. Two of the best. One, first and foremost, Dave Fortune, one of the guys that came into my life very early into my journey. Dave Fortune, hello, how are you? You're one of the first production promoter rep people I ever met in my world, and here we still are 20 some odd years later. Welcome to the show. How are you, buddy?
Well, thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks
Awesome,
for having
man.
me.
And our favorite person in the whole business, really one of the greatest guys in the in this fine business of ours, one of the busiest guys on the planet, Mr. Chad Guy. How are you, sir? Welcome to the show.
I'm great. What's up, friends? How are you?
I'm a little.
I don't deserve the intro. I don't deserve the intro at all. Yeah, I mean the truth comes out. It's good.
Oh, okay.
You deserve the
See how
intro.
that worked out.
You absolutely deserve the intro. So you guys have played an integral role. Dave was the first promoter rep I really met when I started touring so long ago. I think I was doing a show. I did the Starfish Room in Vancouver, and Dave was doing the Boss Tones, I think, at the Commodore Ballroom. And so we were all at the Starfish Room, and the jury's out who I was working with, whether it was Pete or Daryl Staples. I think it was Daryl, but I was over there, and they're like, "Hey, if you guys want to go see the Boston's at the Commodore, just go up there and ask for Dave Fortune." So I went up, asked for Dave Fortune, and next thing you know, we were in there. And then fast forward many tours later, moved to Vancouver, meet Dave, or tell Dave I'm out here, tell Pete Clyde I'm out here. They bring me into the world, and like I guess late 06, 07. And here we are, which in turn brought me into the world of Chad Guy, who was this, the first time I think we worked together, Chad, I was probably running on one of your arena shows or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe you came into the office, but it was in those early phases of me at Live Nation in Vancouver. And there's Chad. And I'm like, well, this guy is rocking shows. How do I do what he's doing? Because he's way younger than me and he's rocking it. So anyways, how are you, buddy?
I wish I was. The first time we met was Deviate Festival in Saskatoon, and you were tour managing Jay Englishman, and I was playing in a band from Saskatoon called Five Man Miracle at the time.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was the first time we ever hung out, and that was 98, 99,
yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And that was Deviate. Geez, that would have been John Donnelly too. That would have been like no relation, everybody. Oh, we lost Dave Fortune. I don't know where he went, Dave. I think he's got the bad internet. Oh, there he is. Dave's back now. Dave, we lost you, but you're back. Deviate. That would have been a John Donnelly production, wasn't it? Right.
It was.
And
we're on the riverbank in Saskatoon.
Good. Yeah, you're right.
Headlined it that night. going back to the Boston's. Yeah, they headlined that night.
Right. And so then from there, it was Jet Set Satellite. It was
Yeah.
me. It was like
Sloan.
Jay and Sloan.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. There we go. So see, Chad even took it
Seems
even
like
further back.
yesterday. Seems like yesterday.
Mhm. Crazy. How did you two meet? You two, Dave and
I met
Dave and Chad.
Chad when he was he was running the theater in Saskatoon, and we did a bunch of
Regina.
shows
Yeah,
together. And then I remember doing the Tragically Hip there. We did this tour, and quietly conning him into leaving his role and to come join us in this crazy road world that we do. I don't know if I remember that correctly though, Chad.
Yeah, that was, I think, the time that we had that discussion. I was a musician for years and years and years, and when I moved home and got off the road from playing,
musician and dancer, I might add.
And dancer, yeah.
Yes,
I'm pretty nimble for a big man. I've got the moves. It's good. But that whole scenario, I met my future wife, and we were having a baby, and I was absolutely miserable in the venue job. And I think it was that Tragic Hip tour that I kind of filled you in on. I was looking for anything else, and you were kind enough to bring me into the House of Blues family at the time. And that's really, for me, that's what I consider the pivotal moment for me getting into this industry and doing what I do now. And I've always said I owe Dave a huge debt of gratitude and really positioning me to do what I do now. So I'll always be grateful for that moment for sure.
Well, it helped that you knew what you're doing and you were good at your job. So, but it was also just fortuitous timing, because at that time was when the music industry was exploding. At that time, around, I guess that would have been in and around 2000 or so.
Yeah, I made the move. It was 2004, 2005
Okay.
when I started doing House of Blues dates with you, but we were certainly doing shows together. I started at the theater in 99, 2000, somewhere there.
I mean, the industry into itself just exploded at that time. And,
Yeah.
if you put it into perspective, we went from doing 400 or so shows a year in like 98, 99 out of our office to, 900 shows a year out of our office and 1,800 shows nationally.
Right.
So it just, the advent of new musical artists, but more importantly, the advent of different technologies that brought the ability to have more music available at more times. It created a wave of new opportunities for artists, and we just couldn't keep up. So it was a little bit of drinking from the fire hose for a bit there. But so whenever you found somebody like the two of you guys, it was like, well, this is an easy decision. Come on board, boys, if you're interested. Come get wet with me in the fire hose.
It's a great time in music. I talk with Mike and all the buzz about that all the time. How we long for those days again. Would give anything to just go catch a couple club shows, this week and have those opportunities to do that again. The pandemic's amplified it, but I mean, that was just a very special time in music overall, for
sure. What was the setup prior to that, Dave? Because you were head of production at Live Nation in Vancouver, but before that there was, I think, Panther and our colleague and mentor Ron Chamberlain was there. There was sort of like, was it regional? Was it like only the Calgary people ran Calgary show or Alberta shows? What was sort of the layout of the land, at least in Western Canada at that point, before we all started going on tour at that point?
Well, it's kind of a long story, so I'll try and condense it as best I can. But when I came on board with Panther, so Panther was a company that was based in Vancouver run by a group of musical professionals that I still consider mentors and friends. A fellow named David James, Brian Lowe, Deb Nilsson, and they were nice enough to bring me on board as a promoter rep. They had a contract with MCA Concerts at the time. And that contract was for all the production services, because at those days, promoters didn't really have promoter reps, and it was easier for them to have another company that managed and maintained all of their production services needs. So that's how I came on board. I was actually the same as you guys. I got brought in because of our friend Ron Chamberlain. I was a touring guy as well. I toured with a punk rock band called SNFU, and we had done numerous shows in Vancouver. And we had all moved to Vancouver by that time. And Ron was nice enough to say, hey, if you're not doing anything, you're not on the road, you should come and help me out. So I did that. And I remember my first show was at Richards on Richards. I did it Jeff Buckley. I did Jeff Buckley at Richards on Richards. And kind of the rest was history. I really enjoyed it. My wife really enjoyed it. The fact that I wasn't going to be away for as long as I'd been away. And, it turned into a contract that turned into a full-time career for me. So it was wonderful. Panther ended up losing the contract, fortuitous for me, because myself and two other gentlemen, Lyle Chaussee and Dan Cowan, got brought on board to take care and create an actual department for MCA, which at that point had become Universal Concerts. And then Universal became House of Blues. And then in 2006, House of Blues got sold to Live Nation. So that's the genesis of it all. Does that make sense?
Chad, were you at that point, you had gone, you're doing some theater stuff, but what was your first, did you know what a promoter rep was at that point? Because it's a relatively new position, I would say. I mean, it's not like it's been around 50 years. It's really been something where I think you touched on it earlier, Dave, where we're going out and running shows for people. So were you familiar with that gig at that point, or was it get thrown into the fire and learn like the rest of us?
Yeah, not as much. I mean, it wasn't really until I started doing shows at the theater that I really got into that world. I mean, everything leading up to that point was touring in bands and we never did much more than, large festival runs and club runs and stuff like that. So it was just always dealing with the club guy or, whoever happened to be dealing with production at the festival or whatever. So really not until that point. And it wasn't until I started at the theater and started doing shows with Dave and House of Blues and the different promoters, Jeff Perry and all the guys of that era, that you really established those relationships and understood what the role of the promoter rep and seeing how that, was so crucial in the success of the tour and melding all those 30 dates together and everything else. That was really my first introduction to it, was running the theater.
It's quite a job. I mean, I wasn't, I'd met Dave, as I said, I met Pete Clyde. I'd met some people along the way from doing as a tour manager. And you're like, oh man, what a cool gig that is. Like, Rob Warwick out in the burbs. Rob, how you doing out there? Like those guys that were running all the small markets and everything. It was quite an interesting thing because I had come from being a small time promoter as well in Ontario, Southern Ontario, doing shows for the tea parties. And I wasn't doing anything international, but I'm doing all the Canadian CanCon stuff. And, but me individually running around and putting up posters and doing all the things and doing all my own show, never even thinking for a second to hire somebody to do it for me. Cause I'm like, I got to do it all. So to see that gig, meet somebody like Dave, John Donnelly, or all these guys and be like, wow, that's a gig. Holy, I want to do that. That sounds like it's going to be a really cool gig, which completely changed my perspective on where I wanted to go with it. So I touched a bit last week on making it and, a little bit about doing Pearl Jam in Toronto and being surrounded by everyone who was there with me on that journey or leading me to the journey, all the people I missed the phone bills for, all the people that all the couches I'd slept on, everyone was at that show. And I'm like, I made it ish, or my version of making it. And then realizing I touched on it, but realizing that I was at the top of that level and the bottom of the next. Because there's always somebody that's done more. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me. So part of this thing, I want to kind of get into everyone's definition of making it. What is your definition of making it? So Chad, let me start with you for a minute on as far as like your moment where you had felt like you made it, or have you actually made it and you're still going for it? I know it's kind of a two-part question, but when was that moment for you where you're like, I think I just made it, I think,
There's been so many moments for me. Like I can't pick a defining moment because I don't think I'll ever feel like I've made it, just the way that I'm programmed. There's been so many goals that I've set that I've been fortunate enough to reach with the help of people like yourself and Dave and, and every step of the way. I have so many great friends and colleagues in this industry, and every single one of them have helped me along the way. But I can't say that I feel like I've made it. There's been, every time you crush a goal, you have that satisfaction of crushing that goal. But for me, that just leads to the next goal. One of my favorite sayings is, I didn't come this far to only come this far. You know what I mean? Like
That's a good one.
It's like it's an endless path for me. Like, I think when I started out as a musician, when you're 14 years old and you're playing in your first band, all you want to do is get your first gig. And you get that first gig and you work and work and work, and you get your second gig and you play locally, and all you want to do is tour. So and then you go, I grew up in Regina and we're playing here in high school, and then all you want to do is play in Saskatoon because you heard about this great club, and you get these opportunities, and then you want to record, and then you do some demos, and then you want to put out a record, and then there's all these little steps, right? But I've never along the way have I hit one of those goals or accomplished what I set out to do and then just went, great, I've done that. It's always kind of like, well, what's next? What's more? When I started working for Dave, it's like my first tour for Dave was Sam Roberts club tour. And so you crush a couple of club tours, and then it was like, man, it'd be great to do theater shows, so then you jump up to the theater shows, and man, I'd love to do arena dates. You jump to arenas, and all of a sudden you do a festival, and then you're in, do stadiums, and then you're touring, and it just kind of spins off from there. So I'm so fortunate to have had the opportunities that I've had and that I've been given. But it just doesn't feel like it'll ever be done. I have so much more I want to do. I love this business and I love the people that I work with. And it's just each challenge leads to the next challenge. And that's what I really get off on. I just love, the progression of it, and seeing where we're all at now, 25 years later, seeing where everybody's at, seeing what we're accomplishing together and what everyone's doing is just the best, So.
Dave, same question for you. Was there a defining moment for you where either A, you knew this is what you were going to do, or B, you felt like you had quote unquote made it or set those goals, or are you still trying to make it?
Well, I'll echo what Chad said. I mean, I think one of the defining parts of the music industry is, generally speaking, most people in the music industry are doing it because there's an underlying passion for music. I think we all could have probably gone off and made a ton of money doing, some solace job and made it, I guess, in that front. But we made a decision to come to this industry with no real understanding of what the roles would be or what the outcomes would become. We didn't have a job that was going to pay, a pension in 30 years. That was never an option. It wasn't even alluded to. So from that perspective, being driven by love of the music gives you that sort of like continuous drive to keep doing more and more and to improve upon what you've created. So I remember I played on a hockey team, the Panther hockey team. That was run by there was a bunch of musos on it, and my old boss Mark Norman was on that team. And I remember doing a skate for the warm up, and Mark basically offered me the job to help him create the department. And I was like, okay, I think I just made it. It was my first salary job in years. It was amazing. So, and then you just kind of, you keep on transitioning and building on that and building on it and building on that. So, I mean, it's a never ending cycle. I think that the people who are satisfied with that end are doomed to fail within this industry, because again, there's never been any sort of real true guarantees given to anybody.
Chad, you talked about goals and some of the things that you went after. And I think you touched on it really well from the standpoint of, I want to do, you start in clubs, and then you want to do theaters, and then you want to do arenas, and then you want to do stadiums. And then we all just want to go back to theaters, right? So you kind of do all this sort of stuff. Now we didn't quite dive into what you individually do, which I'd like to get into for a second. You're a production manager, a tour accountant. I'll let you kind of give off your resume on that side. But amongst that goal in that journey that you were going after and setting goals, what was that first moment then where you're like, wow, I did it? Like, I pulled off a stadium show. What was that first feel good moment for you where you really felt like you had the job dialed in, but also that like you got this, but you also hit that goal at that same time? Do you remember that show or an individual moment of that?
Probably much like you, like doing the hometown shows were always a big deal for me, because you're coming from a city this small. It's a very tight community. I started helping with stadium shows for Live Nation, in 2008, 2009, AC/DC. I did a Bon Jovi thing for AEG in 2010. I think the stadium dates in my hometown were kind of that defining moment where you're walking through this in a city like Regina. I mean, there's only 350,000 people here, and you walk through a sold out stadium show and every other person. I mean, and it's just to have that kind of just that recognition and seeing, those shows. I mean, I remember the first stadium show we ever had here was the Stones, and it was long before I was kind of involved at the level that I am now, and just seeing that production and seeing, just not even being able to wrap my head around it and what it takes to pull off a production like that or be involved with that. So at that time, it was satisfying, of course, to do those stadium shows in your hometown. And then it was also satisfying to do it at the Meadowlands in New Jersey and do the Bon Jovi hometown show where we did, I think it was 11 or 12 shows or whatever in a row on that run as their hometown stand and those kinds of things. And for me, it's always, I'm such a nerd for music and live music. It's, reading the album liners or, playing at historic venues. For me, I played the Bercy in Paris, or you play the O2 in London, or you do the Download Festival, or you play Sweden Rock, or all these festivals that you grew up following as a kid, and these venues that you saw read about your favorite bands playing at, live at the Budokan. And I mean, and to me, the first trip to a new country and a new market, it was always really special. The first time I went to Japan, or those kinds of things were landmark moments for me, and not that those were ever specific goals, but again, just like Dave mentioned, being such a fan of music and such a fan of live performance and reading the album liners and reading the liner notes and being that kid that studied all that, and then to go play in that venue, 25 years later and do those things. Those are big moments for me, for sure.
Yeah. It's amazing how the venues become the celebrity, really. Everyone talks about, you must meet all these bands and it must be amazing to be around these bands. And I'm like, bands can be a pain in the ass. You know who's not a pain in the ass? Wembley. Walking around Wembley's not a pain in the ass. Wembley's just huge, but it's on the list. So for me, the venue becomes the rock star to me. At least is having an opportunity to add
list, right? Yeah.
Right. It's like add this many O2s and this many Madison Square Gardens. I sort of break it down for me mentally as like, hey, I've got this many Pearl Jam shows. I really need 10 more to get to this number. Or I've got, this many O2s. I need, that's awesome. Or I've got this many. So for me, it's kind of moved into venue perspective and gig perspective to your point, Chad. Dave, same question to you as far as, your feel good sort of like, I got this moment. This was an awesome experience to be a part of.
Well, I have actually a recent experience, and it's funny when you mention this topic and the idea of making it. I think that again, we're so Canadian. Sorry, I don't know if everyone on your podcast knows, but all three of us are Canadians, so we have Canadian attributes to us, and I can't. It's hard to be modest about certain things, but there was a moment this summer where coming out of the pandemic, there were certain moves that are being made by promoters, in particular Live Nation, where they're scrambling to get shows up, and I was able to benefit from that because again, they hadn't planned on staffing some of these tours, and I was able to, luckily enough, I guess my making it moment is that our friend Ron Chamberlain called in a bit of a stir to say, hey, what are you doing right now? And can you help us out? We've got a stadium tour that's up and it's basically sold out and we need somebody to go out and do it for us. So I guess from that moment, I was like, yeah, okay, great. Oh, and where is it? Oh, I get to go to a show at Dodger Stadium and Wrigley Field. Okay, I'm in. So it was a pretty good feel-good moment. Again, we struggle with relevance and we struggle with, a bit of ego as well. Sometimes coming out of the pandemic, it's like, okay, what's going to happen next? And when the phone rings and, you're considered for these types of experiences, it's a nice feel-good moment for sure.
Yeah, I think that perspective of just getting the call is a very good point, Dave. I think that you know, we want to stay working, but in that particular situation, it's like we need 10 stadiums banged out real fast, and who can we call at any point that can do that? That comes down to training. It comes down to, what we've been through, and it starts at that club level. It's amazing how the similarities between the club level and the stadium, where you still got parked trucks, you still have to put people in the building and out and all the rest of it. And it's funny when new promoter reps are coming along and they look at the big perspective and they go, "Oh my God, I got to do 5 years at the media club or 5 years at this little at the district or something." And it's like, yeah, but it all goes to the same. It all goes into the same pile, and it's just a bigger media club
I always
down
used
there.
to say, I always used to say that the club shows are generally some of the harder shows you'll ever do.
I
In
was
part
just gonna
because,
say that too. Yeah.
yeah, because you're all by yourself, and you're the one who's responsible for problem solving. Whereas in a stadium, generally speaking, you have an entire staff of really dedicated, well-trained people who are working at those said stadiums who are equal to the task of any sort of problem solving. So, you get into a club situation, and it's absolutely the best place to learn anything and everything because you're doing the settlement, you're doing the catering, you're doing the security in some respects. Maybe not as much these days, but back in the day, boy, there's a few times I had to jump into the pit to help out. And these are just lessons learned over the years, and I don't think that changes. That's not a 1994 problem as opposed to a 2021 problem. I think that those things will always be something that we can glean from.
Chad, agree? Yeah, you did a lot of clubs and theaters on that.
Yeah, 100%. I joke about that all the time. Like, it's funny to me that you get to stadium level, or you get to, you're touring all over the world, and and you look back. I remember, doing, you do a show at the Bird in Winnipeg, and you get on the plane, you fly in, you rent the car, or you go to the liquor store, you go to the grocery store, you buy the rider, you do all that, you cruise to the club, you unload everything, set up the dress room, set up the catering, on top of doing all the production duties and everything else. And again, at the absolute best learning ground to really wrap your head around what we do now on the larger scale, and appreciate what it takes to do that. And I loved every minute of it.
It's funny the parallels between the two, and especially when you're, I want to get to passing on some advice to people as far as breaking into our side, which is a very common question, which is why I kind of started this side of things about making it and breaking in. I get asked a lot about how do we make it and how do we break in, and again, everyone has their definition of making it. Chad, you and I both started in bands. Dave, we're all musicians here. Chad's, and we all started with this perspective of probably going to be a rock star first. Chad made it further along than I did, as far as
I'm just gonna say, just for the record on this, not to cut you off, but I was a band god with musicians. I learned very early that my level of mediocrity as far as guitar playing was never going to be a career, but I knew how to get the van from point A to point B. So I was able to figure it out early enough. Thank God.
Yeah, and we all kind of, I was in that, and I had grand plans of playing big stages and doing the whole thing, but then the logistics and the nuts and bolts became much more intriguing to me. Eventually, even though Dave and I still play in the greatest cover band of all time. We play once every 12 years, and it's great, but it's fun to play, but it's certainly fun to play in the logistics side. Chad, you got a big gig right now. You've had a big gig for a few years. You do it a little different than Dave and I. Dave and I on the promoter rep and tour director side, but give us the Chad guy right now, because you're super busy with one of the busiest bands on the planet.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to hook up years ago with Team. I think it was initially a Motley Crue tour that started it off, but my good friend Robert Long was production managing Motley, and we developed a relationship when I was a Live Nation guy, and I did all their tours and stuff in Canada for years. And they also do Kiss, and we kind of rolled for a couple of years just doing Motley into Kiss. And there was an opportunity that came up, I think 2015 or 2016, for me to jump on the Kiss tour, leave the promoter side, and hop over to the band side and become their tour accountant. And which has been absolutely great. And to see that side of it now and kind of give me the full 360 experience in the business, and spent, like I said, so many years as the promoter rep, and now to really dive into the artist side has been incredible. I love a great challenge, and I've loved every second of it. And so it's been years with those guys already. And we, at January 30th of 19, we did the very first show of their end of the road world tour. So we're plowing through their current farewell tour, not like the farewell tour Dave did years ago, but it was looking back on that, thinking of when you asked about if there's a moment where I thought I made it, it was funny because Dave has a photo that he often makes his Facebook profile picture of him standing in front of Ace and Peter backstage in Vancouver. I think that was New Year's Eve 2000. Correct me if I'm wrong, for their initial farewell tour forever ago. And as soon as I got that job with them, I immediately thought of that picture, because that was always, as a young promoter rep and still doing smaller shows, I'd looked at that picture on Dave's profile and just go, man, working with Kiss, how cool would that be, right? And then getting that job and becoming one of their guys, and was kind of a full circle moment of seeing that picture originally. But yeah, it's been absolutely great. So we should have been done last July. If the pandemic didn't happen, we would have been wrapped up and on to something else now. But we just finished another North American leg here at the end of October, and hoping for the rest of the world to catch up and open up so that we can kind of continue on and get this tour wrapped up for the guys. But
I find it funny, Chad, that you're talking about a photo that Dave posted about New Year's. And it comes back to liner notes and reading albums and all the rest of it, right? So you're like, oh man, wouldn't that be nice to work with Kiss one day? And then here you are working with Kiss, or it's like, wouldn't it be nice to do Wembley one day? Or wouldn't it be nice to do this? And there you are. And I think it really harkens back to what we were talking about, as far as like, you're working with arguably the, largest band in the world, production wise, at least. People will fight all day long about, Stones versus versus McCartney, and whatever. People are going to have their suggestions, but you're working with arguably one of the biggest bands in the planet from a production wise. It started at, you started at doing club shows for Dave and moving up, and we're all sort of in that world, and it never changes. And that's something I want people that are listening and watching to take away from this, is that like, Chad is there and he's still trying to make it, or quote unquote, he's still always searching for the whatever the next perspective. You did, I think, the first real pandemic show in Saudi Arabia with Kiss, and people were watching. What are you doing for COVID testing and all the rest of it? So anyone watching is going to go like, oh man, Chad made it. He's working with Kiss. He did Saudi Arabia. It's like the Chad's still adding things to his levels. And it's very interesting that perspective that Dave puts that thing up, and you still get a kick out of looking at that picture.
That's hilarious to me. Yeah, I feel super fortunate to be able to learn from old school guys like that. Like, in the same way that I was fans of bands, I'm also a nerd for great production managers. I'm also a nerd for, tour managers, and these people that you work with once, or you want to work with, and for me to learn from guys like Doc McGee and Gene and Paul, these guys invented big rock touring. The education I got working for Dave and being a promoter rep was absolutely invaluable. But again, the full 360 view of that for me to now be on the artist side, and the business has changed so much, but to work with these guys every day and deliver what they need with their 1970s and 80s kind of mentality on the touring business, and the way that they've done things for 50 years on the road, and kind of be able to be the conduit between that and the business today has been really interesting for me. I love the biggest challenge of my life, for sure, and especially doing my role, because I'm kind of doing dual roles. There's a production management and the tour accounting side to an act that big. All of us out there, our team's pretty small, and we do multiple acts, so we all do 2 or 3 full-time jobs out there. But I mean, to be able to learn the business from that, I'm just such a fan of the business, so it's been cool. And I get off on everything that I've learned and experienced kind of doing both sides, and again, working for guys that have been in the business for 50 years and created what we do in this huge arena and stadium tour, the big rock spectacle. And to be doing the Dubai thing, last New Year's Eve was Dubai. We played New Year's Eve last year, and again, long before vaccines, in the middle and the height of a pandemic, we're all getting on planes and flying all over the world and doing shows and doing it safely and all those things. I mean, opportunities like that would only come with a band like Kiss, and I've been like super fortunate to be a part of all that, for sure.
No pun intended that you've been fortunate. Dave, did you have that moment of like looking at someone's Facebook profile and going, "Oh man, that would have been great to work with them," and then you ended up working with them? I don't know if Facebook was around.
Oh
then,
yeah, no, and I keep coming back to Ron Chamberlain, but I was fortunate enough to get brought onto the site crew for Metallica. No, sorry, yeah, no, I'll say Metallica. No, sorry, I should know this stuff. I don't. Lollapalooza, and I literally spent a week just hustling, power cable around and putting up fence and putting up tents and stuff like that. And it was awesome. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. And I thought, this would be something that I'd actually kind of enjoy doing. For a guy that was like a university grad who didn't know what he wanted to do and kind of hated the job that he had at the time. I was working as a publicist, believe it or not, for an independent record company called Cargo, and I couldn't do it anymore. It was terrible, and at that point I was like, this could be pretty cool. I could do this, and then that turned into our relationship. Obviously, getting to know Ron pretty well and the guys from Panther pretty well, David James in particular. We keep talking about mentorship here a little bit, but I think that it's important from the making it perspective, that if you're going to start off and get into anything, to find people that you can kind of point north towards, and you guys have been very kind in your assessment of my skill sets. But I learned everything from David James and Dave Clark, who people like Barb McDougall and the real trailblazers, who truly figured it out. When we were first starting out, they did everything, but more importantly, they did it right, with the right intentions. And I remember when I first became a promoter rep, it was still sort of a dirty word to be a promoter. Promoters were not really what you would consider the most ethical, should I say, and there was still some shenanigans happening. My early tour days in the punk rock world were, riddled with stories of, like I've had guns pulled on me at settlement, and, had to chase the promoter to his house to get paid, that kind of stuff. It was just like, there was times where it was just like, what are we doing here? This sucks. But when you come across people who are, principled and have ethics and, and really just truly want to do things for the right reasons, it's easy to set your targets on people like that. And I don't think that's changed today. The music industry, to both of your points, has changed so much in the last 30 years, 20 years in particular, that it really has become far more, I keep coming to the word principled, but it really is more just, the business side has taken over, which is a good thing in a lot of ways. And there's still lots of people out there who are doing it for the right reasons, with the right people involved. And I think that's where you point yourself towards, and you'll get through it, and you'll make it.
I said on the last show that I always felt like it's 95% business and 5% music, and people will scrap me on it, but I'm like, yeah, but think about the music portion of it. You're only on stage for 2 hours. The rest of the time, it's the business. We got to go to press. We got to do this. How many albums did we sell? How many tickets did we sell? Business, 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 business. Okay, we're going to forget business for 2 hours, go on stage and play. And the second I'm off the deck, Chad, you gave me a great Bon Jovi story a couple of years ago about merch, about he'd call down. I don't know if Gene still does that, but I've heard Gene calls down. How'd we do on merch? I heard Bon Jovi called down and was like, what'd we do? Well, put those hats down. It's business all the time, right? Yeah. And that's 5% music. So I think, maybe it's 90-10, but I like to go 95-5 because that's what I've seen anyways. So
that 5% is so powerful though, right? It's that 5%. It's that one song lyric that the person bought the ticket for, and we've all been in the middle of the giant crowd, and felt what that feels like. And it's all stems from that emotional connection that people have to that music. And the rest of that, the other 95% wouldn't be there if the music didn't mean anything,
Right. So it almost makes it 50-50, but the perspective of actually what we do, or you and I, we all see it.
Yeah.
My moment, for me that I do, and I'm not sure what you guys have personally per show, if there's something that I got to get a set list, or I've got to get this, or I've got to get that. I take a ticket stub from each show. I'm not sure if you guys take anything away from a show, but for me, I've never missed the beginning of any show I've ever done, the headliner. Don't often get out for the support. I will do my best. I'm always out kind of walking around in the building, but I literally make sure I am in that house when the house lights go out. And I've never missed that, outside of when I was actually sick and missed a show for once. But I've never missed the beginning of the headliner set, because those lights going out and everyone losing their mind is that moment for me where we've all worked at our job to make sure that this show happens for people, but everyone in the building is getting exactly what they want at that moment. And that rarely happens in any kind of job. We get that we get that 100 times a year, where everyone's getting that moment. Everyone's getting a Stanley Cup presentation. Their team wins the Stanley Cup at every show we do, because when the lights go out, they get that moment. And the other thing to that is, people forget that some people have never been to a concert before, and that's their first concert they've ever been to, or it's the only show they're ever going to go to because it's all they could afford. So that moment, every single night, somebody's getting exactly what they want. And it's something that I personally do every single show. I'm not sure what you guys do, but I'll let you touch on that if you want. But we touched a bit on the making it and the journey side of it. So keeping in mind with that theme of people asking us all the time, how do we make it and what do we do? We've got the three of us have all done the same job, but Chad, you're off to do, tour accounting and production management now. What is your, advice to pass on to these young kids or anyone that's coming out that's like, how do I do what you do, Chad? How do I do what you do, Dave? What is your advice? Let's go with Chad first, as far as like, what would you tell them to do to streamline that process for them?
Learn from everybody that you come across. Listen more than you talk, and outwork everybody. I mean, I was really fortunate that I had a father that taught me about hard work and work ethic, and he was an entrepreneur his whole life, and showed me the value of hard work from the get-go. And that's something that I spend so much time instilling in my kids now, because I see a bit of a lack of that now. But I mean, that's been everything to me. And I think that's a Canadian thing. I think that's a bit of a prairie thing too, that farm boy kind of mentality, where it's just like, you'll outwork anyone if that's what it takes, and for me, the biggest thing, and I still carry it forward, and what means the most to me, I think, it means the most to me in this business, and that's what fulfills me and satisfies me more than anything, is that it's all relationships. And it's the relationships and the friendships I have with everyone in this business now that I find to be the most satisfying. And it's those relationships and those being a man of your word, and being an honorable person, and just working hard and being there for people, and not letting people down. And those things will elevate your career as you move forward, because it is about who you know, and it is about the connections that you have, and all of those relationships lead to new opportunities and to new things. And to me, that's probably the most important one. But just work ethic, and absolutely absorb and learn from everyone that's around you, and just protect your relationships.
There's a good example of that, because the three of us have all been together for we've all been working together for off and on 20 plus years. I mean, the first tour manager I ever met was Fabrizio. And we're all together.
Industry. It's a small business, right? Yeah.
We're all together. And then the first promoter rep is Dave. And then Chad, you and I share a festival, you as an artist, but me, as a tour manager. And here we're doing the same thing. Dave, same thing to you, talking to somebody that's coming up to you and saying, Dave, how do I do it? Because you've had to mentor me, Chad, you've had to teach all of us how to do this gig through the people that taught you how to do the gig. So what do you pass on to them when you're leading the charge?
Well, again, echoing my friend Chad's point, this is hard work. The world comes to you if you work for it. And generally speaking, um, it can be a brutal industry to get into because it filters out people who just aren't interested in giving, everything they've got. Um, for what it's worth, though, it can start at the club level. You can volunteer to take on a ticketing job or become a runner. For those who don't know what that is, but we will hire somebody who has a car or a license to drive a van, and we'll drive around town and get things that are required for the day. Or PA, again, the jobs that I was doing in the early 90s are the same jobs today. These shows don't come together by magic. There's a lot of little bits and pieces, people I know like you, Brent, who were, on the upper edge of hustling as well in a good way, having a furniture business, because we knew that we had stadium shows that needed furniture. All these types of bits and pieces come together, and it's pretty easy and pretty quick, especially for the shows that I do, which are a little bit bigger in scale, to see the shining lights, and you can go, that person right there, she's amazing, we need to give her a shot, and then or give them an opportunity to expand their role and have them have higher levels of responsibility. And generally speaking, your intuitions can be pretty strong on this stuff. I know my intuitions are pretty strong. I've been able to scout people for some time, and inevitably, yeah, I've had a few really wrong turns, but for the great majority, I've found some pretty great people to work with, and now these people are excelling, across North America. It's been wonderful to see too.
It's quite something to see. And then, Chad's point about the Canadian side, I just saw our friend Paul Merks this weekend. I haven't seen him for a long, long time. He lives in London, British Columbia, on a beautiful piece of land. And he had watched my show from last week and had kind of asked me about my version of making it and kind of what it meant. But he was also like, is it a Canadian thing that why everyone works so hard, or you guys like? Because I'm noticing a real difference, and I'm like, I think so. It gets touched on a lot. Our friend Brent Fitz, he talks about playing with Slash and then being out there on tour and then meeting Canadians around the world and then meeting people from around the world going, there's something about you Canadians, and I
If
don't.
I could jump in on this one, because I have a pretty decent theory about this, but
Sure.
for an awful lot of people in the music industry, they live in communities that are close to others. If you live in Nashville, it's a 4-hour drive to pretty much every major city on the East Coast. But for us on the prairies, and for you in Ontario, you lived in Northern Ontario. I mean, hey, let's get in the van and let's drive for 12 hours to the next gig. And that wasn't
Yeah.
even a thing that you would concern yourself about. It's like, oh yeah, no, sure, Calgary's next, let's go. And then we're going to drive 3 hours to Edmonton. And then we're going to drive, 4 hours to get to Saskatoon, and then an hour and a half to, I mean, these conversations weren't even daunting, didn't even stop us. And, a large part of our training, the three of us, came from people like, Raleigh O'Connor, who was a promoter who would just like load up the car or the van. And in some cases, Riley was loading up all the rigging gear he needed to do these shows in these, crazy small towns. But it was just like, hey, see a need, fill a need, you're going to go do it. So I think that is one of the things that's defining about Canadians in industry. But I'll disagree that it's not that it's a unique principal thing, because again, it's a bit of this and it's a bit of that. I agree to the prairie hard work thing is a thing there too. But I've seen some pretty hardworking people who come from some pretty tough parts of town, and I think it just comes back to my opinion is the passion for the music and being able to share that experience. And again, I want to circle back to something you said, Brent, which I 100% agree with. My favorite moment of every show um, is that first note of the headlining act. And I have two jobs generally I want to do. I want to make sure that everything is okay in the audience. I want to make sure that there's no things that need to be addressed quickly. but I also just feed off of that energy. And inevitably, I'm not watching the band for the first 3 songs. I'm watching the crowd, because what we do is unique. We get to invite people into a space for 4 or 5 hours a day, and for that moment, we're creating memories that will last a lifetime. We have a unique experience, whereas somebody in that room that night is going to have their favorite experience of all time. And that's a unique thing. You don't get that in film, you don't get that in TV, you don't get that in any other entertainment environment. We're super lucky on that front.
Agree. Both of you with great jobs, both of you with loads of experience, have trained shit tons of people, but still chasing it and going after it. Chad, anything left on the list, or is it about venues now? Is it about just getting the call? Are you settled into a nice little groove and it's going to be this, or is there something left on your list that you haven't actually accomplished yet?
Yeah, I'm not done. I don't know exactly what that is. I really love the artist side. I'm really enjoying it. For me, I love the experience that I've had with KISS, and look forward to finishing that up and seeing what's next. I think it's kind of like the idea of what's next and not knowing what that is kind of the attraction right now, and what that could possibly or potentially be. Chasing that next thing, I admit I'm probably addicted to the hustle a little bit. I'm addicted to, seeing what's next. And, but yeah, it is about, for me now, I think touring has become, after all these years, it's become more about reconnecting with my friends all over the world. And I love the fact that I can go, I have all these promoter friends and venue friends all over the world. And, you've got a favorite restaurant in every city you go to, and you have a favorite hotel, and there's familiarity from me around the world. I'm getting off now on showing my kids and traveling with my kids. They're going to come to Europe at the end of our European leg this summer with my folks, and we're going to tour around Europe for a couple of weeks, and they're super into it. And, showing them the world and having those opportunities through what I do is really cool for me, that idea. But yeah, it is just about experiences for me now more than anything. And again, I don't have specific artists in mind or whatever, but I love what we do. I really do. I love touring. I love the people. I love my crew. I love the camaraderie and the family aspect of this. And it is family to me. You guys are like brothers to me, and that will always be the way that it is. And there's just so many people that we interact with and count on every day. And I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. So I'm excited to see what's next for all of us, really.
Do you have a bucket list artist?
Not really. I want to work with good people. It's not even so much about the music. I want to work and tour with good people and have these shared experiences together. And I think I can get the same, buzz, like Dave talks about, that excitement of the crowd and this and that. It's not, I could be any artist of any genre. I think if we're all in there pulling together, I get off on more the putting the puzzle together and the logistics and all that kind of stuff. That's my jam, more than having to work with the Foos or some specific artist or pick somebody. It doesn't really matter. I love the challenge. I love hard shit, and I love figuring it out. I love that satisfaction of getting to the top of the mountain, and figuring out how to get there together and do it safely. And,
it's quite addicting. It really is.
It is, yeah. Man. There's an adrenaline rush involved with that. There's It's the most satisfying thing I've ever done in my life. It really is. Taking it from nothing and putting a tour together from the ground up, which is what I've loved from the artist side. Jumping over, like being involved with the tour from the ground up, from design to implementation to building a tour from nothing, and then seeing it go around the world and succeeding at it and doing a good job and working with great people has been the most rewarding thing ever. For sure.
Dave, same question.
Yeah, hold on, question. I have to speak because it's like, Chad, I still don't know how you fit KISS into Mansfield, by the way, as an absolute marvel. It's so impressive.
It's snug. Yeah, it was a little.
I literally called Chad as we were loading in our show at Mansfield, and I was like, "How did you do it?" I was like, "This is ridiculous."
Wasn't somebody trying to do a KISS show in Whistler a few years ago. Maybe Chad, you told me this story, but somebody was trying to do a Kiss show privately or something in Whistler. And I heard rumblings that they were like, well, it's going to cost this much money. And whoever it was that was trying to put the show on had said, well, isn't there like a mini version of Kiss? Or isn't there like a mini version of this show? And Gene had said something along the lines of, no, like it's got to be the whole thing or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's that joke that it's every light every night, right? So it's, I mean, we have to deliver as much production as we can every day, and that is the challenge. But it was interesting, they started that whole leg in Mansfield, like give it the smallest venue right out of the gate, and the rest were easy after that. It's like once we got through that first show, the rest seemed like a piece of cake. But yeah, I mean, in my years with them, I've done 2 shows on 575s, which is, for those who don't know, it's one of the mobile stages. It's one of the larger stage line mobile stages they have. But for what our show is and the weight and the production value and that kind of stuff, it's those are some challenging days to still pull off. Because I mean, Kiss, let's face it, Kiss needs the production aesthetic. It's all about the show. It's all about the production and the gags and everything else. So we pull that stuff every day. We could be in a field in China and we still got to fly all over the audience I mean, we got to figure this stuff out no matter where we have to be, right? So it's I love that stuff. I love those challenges and working together to figure it out. It's just the coolest job I've ever had.
Dave, what's left? Anything left on your list, or specifically you want to try to get to?
Well, it's funny. I'm at a point in my career now where it's like, and again, this kind of underpins your question of making it. There's a point where you come to a crest and you think, oh, I've done everything, I've seen everything, there's nothing that can surprise me. And then, all of a sudden something surprises you and takes you to a new level. I took this stadium run this past summer, and loved every minute of it with just an amazing group of people, which was a nice revelation. The fact that I was that lucky to drop into a group of people who, I would consider friends for years now. It's wonderful. Band was called Aventura. I'd never even heard of them. And then all of a sudden I'm in Miami doing their show, and amazing. So hard to say what's around the corner. Thankfully, I'm at a point in my life where I can enjoy life and have a little bit more of a relaxed approach to things. Going back out on tour with bands in the new year. Haven't been assigned an artist yet, but ready to go. Have some fun. It'd be great.
I think you both touched on the importance of people on this show, and we'll wrap now. But it's really, really important. And I touched on it last week, that the people you meet on the way up, the same people you meet on the way down, same. Here's an example. 3 guys that have been working together off and on in some capacity for 20 some odd years. And I'm not 100% sure what other industries allow that. Because sometimes, if you go into factory work, if you go into this or that, you settle in, and that's kind of what it is. In our particular case, Chad, you touched on, the people are the game for you. Having those dinners in Portugal and having people, like access to those people, that really is what this is about. It's maintaining relationships and doing it. And the fact that we're all together after 20 plus years, I think proves that. And you guys have been amazing teachers for me, and a really great guest today. And I really appreciate both of your time to be on here, telling your story and helping me tell other stories to people about trying to make it, what their version of making it is. Is it feasible? Is it an option? Do we have a ceiling? Jury's out. But 2 guys here that are consistently are building levels on their house, and is awesome to see. So where can everybody find you online there, Mr. Guy? And I'll let you go.
I'm more of an Instagram guy, I think. See some photos from the road, see lots of pictures of my kids. Just give me a follow there. Yeah, I try to document the road life and home life and all that good stuff. So this has been awesome, man. It's been awesome to talk with you guys. I miss y'all.
Yeah, likewise. David, where can people find you online, sir?
Well, again, Instagram is where I live. Again, like Chad, you can see some of the shows that I've done on Instagram. It's right there. Oh, wait, right there. Always a pleasure to chat with you guys. I love both of you guys. A little bit easier with saying I love you, especially coming out of the pandemic. So, gents, always appreciate you.
I love you, man. That's how it goes. This has been the Brenton on Tour podcast for another week, continuing with the series of Making It. Two guys that most would think have made it, but are still out there doing it, and it's changing daily, weekly, yearly. We all have different versions of what our version of making it is. Please join me next week, everybody. It is the Brenton on Tour podcast, brentonontour.com for all episodes. Wherever you need to get your podcast from, you can catch me there. And please come back next week, tell your friends, and maybe we'll be able to instruct you a little bit on how to make it. Not sure. Thanks, everybody.